Commander, and I'll be your pilot for today. We're just beginning boarding for flight number 20 from Bundaberg to Rockhampton, so grab your seats while I finish up the last steps of the pre-flight inspections of this Cessna Grand Caravan, the pride of the Martel Air Fleet. Before engine start checklist. Pre-flight inspection complete. Parking brake handle set. Electrical system switches off. Ignition switch normal. Fuel tank selectors both on. Bleed air heat switch off. Power lever idle. Prop RPM max. Fuel condition lever cut off. Fuel shutoff knob fully in check. Battery switch on. Cabin lights on. Cockpit lighting set. Flaps up. No smoking lights on. Before engine start checklist complete. Good morning passengers. The weather today is a little bit cool and cloudy, and we'll be cruising at an altitude of about 8,000 feet, flying over the first parts of the Great Barrier Reef, consisting of the Capricorn and Bunker group. En route, your cabin crew today is me, assisted as always by my co-pilot, Wing Commander Lamington. And your emergency exits are located to the back of the plane where you enter the aircraft. I also have a door up here by me, so if you see me leave, please follow me quickly. Our in-flight catering services are provided by our wonderful passengers, so I hope you pack something interesting. We also have a coffee machine in the back for those who'd like to support the channel and help to buy tasty treats for Wing Commander Lamington. Engine start checklist. Battery switch on. Beacon lights on. Avionics 1 on. Bus faults check. Emergency power lever normal. Inertial separator handle bypass. EIS readings check. Propeller area clear. Fuel boost switch on. Fuel boost on shown check. Fuel pressure low not shown check. Fuel flow 0 check. Starter switch start. Ignition on shown check. Oil PSI climbing check. NG stable. Fuel condition lever low idle. Fuel flow in expected range check. NG climbing. NG stable. Starter switch off. EIS readings check. Generator load check. Battery amps positive check. Fuel boost switch normal. Avionics 2 on. Nav lights on. Engine start checklist complete. We're now ready for departure, so please fasten your seatbelts and turn off your devices, apart from those used to watch this stream. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Before departure, taxi checklist. Taxi lights on. Seatbelt lights on. Taxi clearance. Bundaberg traffic, Martel 20, taxiing for takeoff runway 14, north departure. Taxi clearance check. Nav source set. Prop RPM minimum. Fuel condition low idle. Inertial separator handle bypass. And parking brake off. Before departure taxi checklist complete. So we've got a bit of a crowding situation here, so despite the lines I think we'll be playing it safe and leaving our spot forwards. Discovering that the aircraft does not want to turn. I do not seem to have ground steering. This is where I double check that something hasn't gone weird in the controls. Still registering the joystick axis correctly. Nose wheel steering axis set. Interesting. So, clearly something that was missed on the pre-flight inspection. I'm not sure what's going on there. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Aha, there's the problem. Just a little technical glitch in Flight Sim, and we're good to go. It had registered that there was still a pushback truck attached to the front wheel despite it not being visible. So, an interesting little glitch. Which was also why I was taking more forward throttle than normal to even move forward. So that's an interesting one. traffic around us. Beechcraft who said that they were inbound to land, so we will take them at their word at that, unlike somebody on our flight in here. They have not announced themselves to be clear of the runway, so we will assume that they are still inbound. Joys of non-controlled smaller airports. But we will set ourselves here, parking brake on, and get everything set up for the takeoff. So, for takeoff checklist. Parking brake handle set. Altimeter QNH set. Standby flight instruments check. Fuel boost switch normal. Fuel tank selectors both on. Fuel quantity check. Fuel shutoff knob fully in check. Standby alt power on. Anti-ice not required at 17C. Inertial separator handle normal. Autopilot preparations. Altimeter set for initial cruise altitude 8,000 feet. Set. Flight level change mode engaged. Set for VY. Heading mode engaged. Set for runway heading. Set and bank mode engaged. Autopilot prepared. Nav source is set. Transponder on alt. Flaps to takeoff position. Takeoff clearance. There is no visible or stated traffic. Bundaberg traffic, Martel 20, entering runway 14 for takeoff, north departure. Takeoff clearance check, strobes on, landing lights on, seatbelt lights on, parking brake release, prop RPM to max, fuel condition high idle, before takeoff checklist complete. And let's taxi. And we'll do a back taxi to get us to the start of the runway, just to give us the best length for our takeoff roll. Relatively short back taxi on this one. And we get a lovely view of any incoming traffic, which there is none. There's a lovely turning bay here, which is even nicer. and a small pull-off area if we had an emergency and noticed that, oh, that's an incoming plane, but there isn't one. So, we are ready for takeoff. Flaps are in takeoff position. Co-pilot confirm. And power lever. Smoothly advance. Just as another aircraft announces they are on final behind us, but they are 11 miles out. Quite the headwind and crosswind there, which is a little bit entertaining. And holding climb speed as we go. Obstacles clear. So flaps up. And autopilot engaged. Runway heading until we are clear. Brisbane Centre, Martel 20 is type Cessna Caravan, 2 miles southeast of Bundaberg, or 1,300 feet. Request flight following. Squawk 6577, Martel 20. Acknowledged, Martel 20. Thank you. And that is a meaty looking storm ahead of us, but luckily we are in fact turning away from it and getting... We have a traffic report from ATC and we'll see them. Martel 20, traffic is in sight. As I was saying, we are turning out to sea and beginning our flight to the north, so we can turn away from that large and ugly storm, which is rather comforting. Okay, cruise climb checklist. Anti-ice system not required. Inertial separator handle normal. Airspeed is set to VY. RPM is in climb range. Power lever set to keep engine temperatures below 800. Check. And make a little balancing act. Bundaberg, heart by reputation of the sugarcane industry in Australia, which is why it is the home of two different Bundaberg's drinks companies, one of which makes most notably overseas ginger beer. My favourite is the sarsaparilla, which is like if root beer had flavour. And the other is Bundaberg rum, because that is what you make. That is the alcohol you get from cane sugar. And yes, the size of the sugar industry around this part of Queensland is a lot of why Australia is not as filled with high fructose corn syrup as the US is, because we just have cane sugar as one of the heavily subsidised crops, and one of the quite common crops, and we don't have quite the corn subsidies. that's some bouncy weather. Climbing through 5,000. We are still in a traffic area, so we'll keep the landing lights on for now. Oh, and it is some interesting bits of weather. And they called out another bit of traffic for me to watch out for. Which I cannot see. Martel 20, traffic not in sight. Well, seem to have something going on with my throat today, so that's a little bit of fun. One of the things that I often notice with the Microsoft Flight Sim air traffic control is its love of calling out ridiculous traffic checks for things that are not actually anywhere near you. They had me looking for a Beechcraft BE36 that was, let's see here, what did they say? 4 miles to my 10 o'clock at 1,600 feet. So, not actually anywhere really in my vicinity when you consider the 3D nature of the world. Ooh, and we are getting into a cloud bank. So this might be fun. And there we are with the 1,000 foot tone, telling us that we are 1,000 feet from our destination cruising altitude, but we may be reconsidering that as the navigation mode on the autopilot takes over from pure heading mode, so it turns us a little bit more sharply towards that path and then turns us onto it just to give us that nice little S-curve. Now today, you might notice that we are somewhat flying out to sea. That is because Kagari, the island, the extra large sand island that we passed on our way in, is considered essentially the southern tip of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. So today we'll be flying out over first part of the Great Barrier Reef, which is the Capricorn and Bunker Group, which is a series of, some of them are islands, some of them are atolls with lagoons, some of them are reefs. Basically the difference there is slight differences in the height relative to the sea level. If it is above the water, it is an island. If it is below the water, it is a reef. And if it is just gathering just enough sand on top of the reef to turn it into mostly above the water, it is, well, technically an atoll is a variety of island, but this is where we get into the grey areas between island and reef. Basically, some bits of the reef stick above the water. And some of them do that all the time, some of them do that at low tide, and it in fact continues to change. So we are stable at cruise altitude, so anti-ice system are not required. Seatbelt light I will keep on for the somewhat turbulent weather we've got. Inertial separator handle is normal. Power lever set to 87%, and RPM set for 1750. There's a lot of just small tweaks as these numbers affect each other. If you increase the prop RPM to suddenly, it changes the engine speed, and all of these change the engine torque, and it's all fascinatingly complex and interwoven. Oh, we've got a 14 knot headwind and a 10 knot crosswind here, so there's a bit of wind going on. Once we get out towards the first parts of the Bunker Island group, we will drop down to 5,000 or 6,000 feet to get us below the clouds, because we might as well do some sightseeing on our little detour out over the ocean. So we are a bit further away from the interesting coastline, but getting into the other things that make it interesting. Now, if the name of the Capricorn group sounds somewhat familiar to you, that will be because it is named for the fact that the Tropic of Capricorn goes directly through it. So as we get a little closer to the set of islands where that actually happens, we will officially be in the tropics. So I have noted on my other little map screen here which one that is. So I will make sure to point it out to you as just a nice little marker of, geographical interest. Unfortunately, I don't believe I can get little nav map to show it as part of its setup. That's not quite the sort of information it's usually designed to represent. I don't know why, just because it's a basically meaningless line on a map, but And just checking up on the map of where the Tropic of Capricorn is relative to our destination. Rockhampton is the first city immediately north of the Tropic of Capricorn. So we will be landing in the tropics. So for those who aren't familiar with the ridiculous little designations that we get with this, the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer are two of the 5 interesting bands around the globe, the others being the Arctic and Antarctic circles and the equator. So the tropics are the furthest points from the equator where the sun is ever directly overhead. So this is part of why things are so much warmer and not playing to the usual season markings in between in the areas around the tropics. So the tropics are, depending on whose definition you take, either the areas immediately around these lines or the areas in between these lines. I don't know if equatorial should count as tropical though. So, really, we're in the tropics already, but we will officially have passed into the intertropical zone, if we want to get fancy. And yes, this is why the tropics are at such odd, completely not round, completely not sensible numbers when you compare them to the usual, where we like to put lines that mean things. It's because they are in fact based on a physical phenomenon and not based on how we just want to divide things up. And much like the Arctic and Antarctic circles, which are based on the furthest from the poles, that you get a day in which the sun does not set or does not rise. I think it's only one of the two, I'm not sure which, but I think if you have one, you have to have the other, just as how the opposite end of the year balances out. But yes, so the tropics are sun directly overhead at least once in the year. And basically they are an angle from the equator equal to Earth's inclination from the... So the difference in angle between the axis that the Earth is rotating on per day and the axis that or the plane that the Earth is flying along in an elliptical orbit once per year. And the poles are a complicated inverse of that, because it's all just one big Earth-Sun system. But yes, so this amount of... Oh, nice, much clearer out here. And also very blue. We got blue up, we got blue down. And it's the reason that the tropics have so much more, you know, warmth and abundance of life and all this, is that they get that much more sun, and they get it without having to go through as much of the atmosphere, so there is just more energy being put into the system around here. Which is also why the weather can be so fascinating, because there's energy being put into that system too. Like all... The way that it's, you know, not as warm on a cloudy day, a lot of that energy is not being just blocked from reaching you on the ground. It's also being absorbed by the clouds and air and other parts of that system. So that's why the sky does more interesting things on those days. I guess I've plotted us out a GPS path that takes us over essentially the center of the Bunker Islands, and then one of the major points on the Capricorn Islands. And yes, so we are officially getting into the Barrier Reef, which so essentially, reefs are very bad for ships if they hit them, because, you know, large things that are rock and rock-like, let's face it, coral is just biologically produced rock, that are sitting just below the water where you can't really see them, and will rip the bottom of a ship open. A ship can ground on them, as in push itself up on top of the rocks and not have enough buoyancy to pull itself off again, which means that you've got massive pressure points on the bottom of the ship and it being moved around by waves, tides, all this sort of stuff. Or they can just scrape it and, well, we saw how scraping damage to ships goes with the Titanic. And so yes, the Great Barrier Reef is called a barrier because it's really hard to get ships past this giant wall of reefs that exists off the northeast Australian coast. These days, of course, we've got measured channels that are marked and known, and you know, navigating by radar and GPS, So, you know, ships are navigating essentially like I am in this plane. Actually hitting any of the reefs is very rare. Does happen, often oil tankers, and that goes as you could expect. But you still have to sail around them. And even with climate change doing all of its fascinating killing off the reefs work, coral bleaching and all that, the organically produced rock is still going to be there. Also, if you get a chance to swim around coral or anything of the type, be very careful because, fun fact, you might as well consider that organically produced rock to be made of teeth. It is sharp. You will draw blood just by grazing yourself against it. Like, usually you expect a lot of rocks in the ocean to have been worn smooth. The coral polyp creatures that are producing this organically produced rock have evolved to make their rocks such that they don't erode. I mean, partially because they are being actively maintained, but also, you know, they are the opposite of worn smooth. It's a spicy experience. So one of the things that we are investigating is how Microsoft Flight Sim goes at representing the Great Barrier Reef. So the Capricorn and Bunker Island groups being the southern tip and also slightly disconnected from the main stretch of it, are just going to be our first investigation. We'll find out if it's going to be worth our time to fly out along some of the more central sections as we get further north. Most of the Great Barrier Reef is a little bit further out, but as we get along there over the next couple of flights, we'll find out if it's worth doing the extra little trips out there. I'm just checking the map, and once we get north of Townsville, it looks like it does hug the coast a lot more closely, so that will be an interesting one. And yeah, so I mean, between being the Great Barrier Reef is interesting, and the stuff north of Townsville being closer to the shore, there might be improvements in the overall imaging quality, but we don't know what the imaging quality is going to be like to start with, so we'll see how that goes. And we're about 25, a little bit under nautical miles from our first section of interest, and we can see that at least a couple of the island parts of this little section are modelled. So, and we are getting rocked around a little bit by this air turbulence. But this is what tropical weather is like. More fun, more fun. And one of the things I'll be doing is that with a map up on the other screen, I can actually get the names of these islands and reefs, because they are not navigationally relevant to air traffic, so that they are not mapped, not named on most of these flight maps, which is, you know, clearly very silly, but it is what it is. And we're having the sort of ramble where all of the passengers who are in the plane are asleep or otherwise just not talking at the moment, but that's quite okay. I am quite happy to ramble away to myself and just have it be the recorded content afterwards. It might get a little weird, but it's going to get a little weird anyway. I've been looking at the traffic numbers for the channel and also realizing that I need to not be looking at the traffic numbers for the channel. The advice I got from a creator I follow and am on Patreon for, and thus am on the Discord for, so I get to actually chat to her, Ginny D, who is excellent and does Dungeons and Dragons content, but not just a how can we make my statistical stuff win better. She does storytelling things and playing with the stats. How can we make my characters' options more fun? That sort of thing. So her advice to me, after poking around and commenting on after I was commenting on some of my analytics stats, was that I should not be looking at that too closely until I get above 1,000 views regularly, because below there it is all going to be random noise obscuring everything of interest, which I think is good advice, even though my natural instincts say but there's graphs. So, you know, for example, Flight 16, the one with Waltzing Matilda in it, where we're flying Canberra to Newcastle, has 73 views on the recorded version. Flight 17 after it has 5. 15, flight before it, the Caribou cargo flight, has 37. So, you know, it is really quite variable of how many people will find the videos on each of the different options. Let's take us down to 5,500 feet. That sounds like a good altitude over the reefs here. Power, just so that we don't end up staying too high for too long. Luckily, being out over these islands, we are not in any particular traffic area, because any airline flights would just be going above us at 30-something thousand feet by this sort of position off the coast. And all the general aviation traffic that's just trying to get point A to point B won't be coming out this way. So we are still within sight of the coast, and if everything were to go wrong with the engine, we would certainly be able to get back to land of some kind, I'm fairly certain. Doing everything we can to extend the glide range. Hopefully that doesn't happen. We are a little far from a lot of places. There's an airport on the island just to the south of where we're entering the reef, purely listed as a luxury resort island. So, you know, avoiding that one kind of on principle, really. And we level off, which means we remember to put our power back to 87%. One of the easiest ways to screw up is to pull the power back for a descent and forget to put it back for cruise. Yes, 87% NG with prop RPM of 1750 is what my experimentation has shown to be a quite effective improving the range of our cruise set of settings. And as I am seeing some reef matter visible through the water, I'm just going to take us out to the side so we can see that through the windows instead of having to look through the bottom of the plane, which we can't actually do. But yes, I think officially welcome to the Great Barrier Reef. It is quite the tourist attraction for Australia, for the sort of tourists who like scuba diving especially, sailing, other such interesting things that involve being wet, because the Great Barrier Reef is a reef, mostly not islands. But we get into the lovely bright blue shallow tropical waters and all those sorts of things. Yes, so on Ginny D's advice, I am not looking too hard at the channel stats. Because they are just going to be random noise rather than being anything too specific. But just know that it is taking conscious effort for me not to. And it looks like Big Map's feed might not actually be too keen on some of these islands. We'll just assume that it's a bit shadowed there. One of the classic problems that you get on... I'm going to be completely honest and call it Google Maps and their competitors and imitators, such as Bing, which Flight Sim uses, being a Google product, being a Microsoft product, is that... So step one is to designate everywhere as land or water, and if it's marked as land, you pull in the high-resolution imaging that has been done over land, and if it's water, you pull in the normal to low-resolution imaging that has been done over water. Flight Sim then applies the wave texturing over it, and of course we've got shadows cast by these clouds. But where you get these black islands is they are small enough to have not been met with the high-resolution land mapping passes, but they are tagged as land, so it especially past a certain level of, you know, on the map zoom. In our case, you know, physical zoom by flying over it. It tries to, it knows that it should be reading those high detail land scans, but it's essentially just black in those areas. Which is why you get these fascinating little... You can see that it's modelling a coast and it's modelling some elevation, but the land scan data is just black. So these lovely little sandy islands are in fact just shadowed in Flight Sim at the moment. That's fine. We'll see how it goes as we get further north. And, you know, I'll see if there's any upgrade packs that I can get from a mod site. Modifying Flight Sim is a wonderful tradition. The amount of modifications I've done to the Caribou, for example. But that is just a little point of interest for us. So we're flying along true airspeed of 136, ground speed of about 136. Going to 125.9, Martel 20, goodbye. Brisbane Centre, Martel 20, entering your airspace 5,500 feet. But it is certainly an interesting thing to scout out and fly along as we see how much of the Great Barrier Reef islands might be mapped or not. I do have the Australia scenery pack installed. But clearly that does not include a manual focus on the Great Barrier Reef as a general concern. So we've got a pack that is designed to add many helipads through this. Some packs that would very much like to take my money for single regional airports. That would be an interesting one. This is definitely the sort of thing that's going to take me a while to check and find and all those lovely things. So let's see where we are on this little map. So these two not quite island reef sections they're these kind of D or squashed semicircle sort of shapes that are facing each other with their flat sides. The one that is closest to us is in the Australian pronunciation, I'm sure, Llewellyn Reef, but given that my attempts to learn other languages are currently entirely focused on Welsh, Llewellyn Reef is it's more fun. I do like the Welsh pronunciation of Welsh words and names. But yes, the Welsh double L is, instead of a L, it's an unvoiced L. Which is not a sound that appears in English. So yes, Llewellyn is how that's actually pronounced in Welsh. And the transcription of the Welsh double L into English is an ongoing question of, but what do we do with it? Current consensus is just we pronounce it like L. It used to be that it was transcribed as FL. So in Henry V, you have the character of Llewellyn. And yes, that is only one of the two double L's turned into an FL, the other one turned into an L. But yes, Llewellyn, which is not too far off from Llewellyn. And the other place that that approach shows up in modern usage is in the Welsh name Lloyd, L-L-O-Y-D, which has turned, it has reached English as both Lloyd, as in Lloyd's of London, and as Floyd, as in Pink Floyd. So yes, if you ever wanted to do a Welsh language rock band, you could go with Lloyd Pink, which I think would be quite fun. It's probably been done already, And this one over here, the second of these two D-shaped islands, shout out to anybody who has read, those people that I know from the Hands of the Emperor Discord, and especially those who have read At the Feet of the Sun. This is Fitzroy Reef. So, if there was an island on that, you would be entirely justified in calling it Navanoa. Now that will be entirely incomprehensible to anyone who's not read At the Feet of the Sun. But given how long we spent circling around the town that I call my Navigiani, if you want to understand me more, just read Hands of the Emperor, At the Feet of the Sun, everything else that Victoria Goddard's written. It will make me make more sense to you and make your life better, because they are excellent books. So yes, that is Fitzroy Reef. Just peek out over this side. So lovely little almost islands under the deep blue of the cyans, and then the deep blues of tropical waters. A little too close on the instruments there. I will do an instrument check anyway. Fuel balance is good, engine settings are good, speed is good, altitude is holding, engine temperature is marvellous. Engine temperature we have to keep below 740 Celsius in cruise. Do not maintain above 740, do not exceed 805. And we're currently sitting at 535, so lovely air for flying in, even if it's a little bumpy sometimes. Ahead of us here, we have what I believe... So, we've got Lamont Reef, which is this little stripedy one here. And then we've got One Tree Island Reef. And again, we've got a map glitch black island, but I must presume that is One Tree Island. And there seems to be on the map a single building on One Tree Island, and I have to assume a single tree. But there is the University of Sydney One Tree Island Research Station. So for those lucky people doing the various environmental sciences, I must presume, that would be a heck of an assignment for a uni semester. Yeah, you're just gonna live on One Tree Island in One Tree Island Reef, in the Capricorn group, on the Great Barrier Reef. Bit of a luxury. And then we have, behind that is Sykes Reef, Heron Reef, and Wistari Reef. And there seems to be Heron Island with a resort on it, on Heron Reef itself. And this little cluster here, especially Heron Reef, is... Oh, that's fun. We've got just a little spot of sand where it's not been marked as land, but it has been photographed as sandy. Knowing the technological reasons for why Google Maps, Bing Maps, and all the others mess up like that makes those so much more interesting when you see them. You get this little window into how they coded. So One Tree Island is clearly mapped as an island, but not photographed as one. Whereas this little one on Lamont Reef is not mapped as an island. But as I was getting distracted from, so here we have Heron Reef and Heron Island. This is the part of the Capricorn group that the Tropic of Capricorn goes through. So as we cross over these, we will officially be on the Tropic of Capricorn and creeping north of it. And yes, many of these islands have... Look, there are some with interesting little single feature names, like Country Island, named after somebody who was exploring around here or paying for the exploration, as often happens, such as I can only assume for Sykes Reef and Lamont Reef and probably Fitzroy Reef. Just to the north, which I believe we'll be turning before we reach there, but the next little cluster to the north of here, you have Northwest Island Reef, which has an island in it that I can only assume is Northwest Island. Brew Shoal, which maybe they were making drinks there. We've got North Reef. But we've also got Wreck Island Reef. As I was saying about reefs are bad for shipping. And to the west of here, these ones over here in fact, so we've got, in the centre there is Erskine Reef, and Erskine Island of course, which I can only assume is one of the paid for by, named for the explorer or the one paying the explorer's bills. And then we have Masthead Reef, which is such a shipwreck name. This is the reef where you will just see masts, the tops of masts sticking out of the water. Okay, doing 2 ST clusters in a row is really hard. Masts sticking. That was wild. Oh yeah, STS ST. That is a heck of a consonant cluster. But yes, Masthead Reef, where you will find masts of ships sticking out of the water, presumably. And then we've got, Polmaze Reef, Irving Reef a little further out. That's less interesting. But yes, the shipwreck named ones fascinate me just because, you were getting shipwrecks on these regularly in the 20s and 30s. Like, shipping has not become... these days, you assume ships to be fairly safe. If a ship sinks, it's news, even if it's not a huge one. There's a reason that all of the major historical insurance companies started out as shipping insurance. And in fact, one of the first major developments that led to modern capitalism is essentially the system of, instead of buying a ship and its cargo as your investment, what if we bought a tenth of a ship and cargo 10 times? So if you have one ship and its cargo and it sinks, you've lost all of your money. If you have 10 1/10 stakes and one of them sinks, you've lost 10% of your money. And if you expect to make at least that 10% plus a little bit back from the entire endeavour, then, if all 10 ships make it, you're a little bit even more ahead. If only 8 or 7 ships make it, you've had a bad season, but you're not completely ruined. So, all of this shared risk sort of stuff actually makes a lot of sense, but it led into capitalism. And yes, capitalism is not ancient, it is a couple hundred years old at the most. Where capitalism is the economic control by control of the capital, aka the money. the restaurant owner who does no work in the restaurant but takes home the profits just because they're the one who owns the restaurant, and their investment clearly is what's made all this possible, not the, workers not getting paid enough to even eat at that restaurant. Before then you had ownership of the land. The base natural form is ownership of the supply of labour, which is, it's what freedom and socialism are about, but it's also how ownership of the source of labour is also how slavery works. So, if it's your labour that you own, that's very different to owning somebody else's labour. I don't know why I got onto economic systems theory and political discourse. That's a little wild. We've got another little island there that seems to have just been mapped as sea, so we've got its nice sandy outputs and some very pretty reefs. I do love that turquoise colour. As a fun little historical fact, the reason this colour is called turquoise is because of the Blue Mosque in the city of Istanbul. It was Constantinople, now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople. People from Europe who had not particularly dealt with that colour in large amounts, it existed, but being one of the secondary colours, but cyan is the secondary colour, also what cyanide is named after. Cyanide in several forms is a cyan colour. But yes, the blue tiles of the Blue Mosque were described as Turkish blue. And in French, Turkish is turquoise, which is just turquoise into English. So we imported a second word for Turkish just to mean that particular blue that one place in Istanbul is going wild with, and exactly what colour it is at any one time seems to blend a little. I could get into colour theory in ridiculous depths by getting distracted a little bit, but that is, let's face it, if you're watching these streams and you've made it an hour into this one, my ramblings are just what you're here for. And since this is one where the chat has been quiet, you get unfiltered and unmitigated access to the stream of consciousness as I fly along. And of course, you also get Wing Commander Lamington. We've got another half hour en route approximately. I should turn those landing lights off, we don't need them out here. I got distracted talking to you fine folks and forgot to do that. Oh dear. But luckily that's not a harmful one, that was just an extra safety precaution hung on too long. Okay, and engine settings are good, engine temperature good, fuel balance is good, battery is not discharging or charging, anti-ice system is untouched, generators ticking along nicely, bus faults are good. So we've used 340 pounds of fuel so far, and we've got another 765, and we are using 330 per hour, and an endurance of 2 hours 12 minutes at these cruise settings. The fun little things you can get from looking through all of your instruments. The instrument display in front of Wing Commander Lamington is essentially a duplicate of mine. They are both the primary flight display, or PFD. So he's monitoring what we're getting up to nicely, making sure that I don't get too distracted talking to people and forget to do the actual flying. And we've got a little golf box. Currently have it set up to not show with Commander Lamington's yoke. I'm not sure why those are not showing. I must have clicked in the wrong spot. I usually like those having to show. Flight Sim has those hideable so that so certain cockpits you need to lean around the yoke to actually read all of the instruments, and that is harder to do in the Flight Sim camera system, so you can hide the yokes. And for those who are curious about the difference between a yoke and a joystick and all these sort of things, so where it is a two-handed contraption like this that is twisted like a steering wheel to control the roll, that is a yoke. Now, some yokes like this are on a rod that goes into the control panel. In some other planes, such as on the Caribou and the Fokker triplane that I've flown on stream, the yoke is in fact on a long lever arm that goes down into the floor, and that's where it's a much more direct connection to the cables that control the flight surfaces. So yes, a yoke, you twist it to roll the plane, and you push and pull to pitch the plane. With a joystick, which is typically a one-handed thing, and is actually what I've got on the desk with me here for doing the flights with, you tilt the stick left, right, forward, back for roll and pitch. In my case, it's also set up such that if I twist it around the vertical axis, that is my yaw and ground steering, when the pushback system is not glitching and saying it's still connected. And those are harder to hook up directly to flight control wires. It can be done. Essentially what you do is the joystick continues through where it pivots, and another lever that is moving perfectly opposite it, pulling various wires different ways. All of these linkages, yokes and joysticks, are very complicated. And yes, there's essentially two types of joysticks. I don't know if joystick is only a video game term. I'm now curious about that. Flight stick is the the name joystick is thought to originate with early 20th century French pilot Robert Eno Peltier. There are also competing claims on behalf of fellow pilots Robert Lorraine, James Henry Joyce, and A.E. George. Lorraine is cited by the Oxford English Dictionary for using the term joystick in his diary in 1909, when he went to learn to fly at Blériot School. Okay, so joystick is an aviation term that was taken up by computer game input, so joystick is in fact fine. Might have referred to a type of yoke originally, just mechanically. So the two types of joystick that you get are center mounted and side mounted. So if you think of the standard fighter pilot layout where they have the big fancy seat that they're strapped into 7 different ways, and the joystick between their legs, essentially. That is typical for cramped cockpits. Often you will get yokes in that same layout. It's just a matter of, to roll, are you pushing the stick to the side or are you turning the wheel to the side? So often you'll get, you're turning like this and you are pitching like this, or you'll get, you are turning like this and pitching like this. And the joyful thing about those with the long column into the ground, into the floor of the cockpit, is that your own body adds part of the restrictions on the movement range. There are cases where you pull the entire joystick or yoke into your stomach, and that's the limit of where it can move to, and you suck in your stomach because you need to pull it back a little harder, especially in fighters, because they're doing those interesting maneuvers that you might not want to do. And yeah, that can happen with yokes, where it's fly-by-wire stuff, which is, so fly-by-wire is electronic control reads the joystick or yoke input and transfers it to the control surfaces, where direct control, which is where you've got cables instead of electrical wires, that just is directly connected to the yoke/joystick, possibly with some assistance for essentially power steering. So yes, the other type of joystick, the side stick, is where mine would be mounted essentially on a bigger version of this armrest, and Wing Commander Lamington's would be mounted on the same on the outer side, Airbus planes tend to have side sticks, and they are on the outer side of both seats. So the captain in the left seat is flying left-handed, and the co-pilot/first officer in the right seat is flying right-handed. So you actually have to do some retraining when you're promoted to the left seat. I mean, you still have to readjust to the fact that the throttles are always in the center. They might be in the center down, as they are here, or on the Caribou they are center up. But that's because you need to have just one set of levers for that. And in a two-seat cockpit, you have to put it between you. Now, the irony, of course, is that my home setup for the controls here is set up as if I'm in the right-hand first officer's seat. Simply because my joystick, the Logitech Extreme 3D Pro, which was basically the only joystick on the market for less than $200 when I got it, like 10 years ago, and still is. And also I had one of this exact model as a kid when it was the standard joystick 20 years ago. More than that. So, this thing has just, not changed at all. But it is set up as, it's a asymmetric joystick. It is set up for a right-hander. So, it's got this palm rest on the right side of the stick, and a thumb button on the left side, just where your right-hand thumb sits, and it's ergonomically shaped. Trigger and the top buttons are much of a muchness, but yeah, it's entirely right-handed. So I have had to set that up for a right-handed/right seat setup. Having a dry cough is quite annoying. Not as bad as having a wet cough, I will admit, but a little bit annoying. And we are coming back in towards the coast. and we are flying essentially straight west just because the part of the reef that we flew out to and the Tropic of Capricorn just hits directly east of Rockhampton, which is our destination. And as I was saying before, the small town just to the south of Rockhampton is the one with the Tropic of Capricorn marker tourist attractions. So depending on which runway we're coming in by, we may or may not cross back over the tropic and, down south and then north again, because, runways are like that when they're going north-south. But we will see how that goes. And in fact, as we start our approach, I go to nav map and start pulling up the runway information. It looks like runway 15 will be it. So I believe we'll be approaching from the north. Looks like runway 15 at Rockhampton has a 3-knot headwind and a 2-knot crosswind, which is a little bit of spice, but nothing too major. The problem of having 7 or 8 different stream relevant screens open on my right monitor, as always, is that I can get very distracted flipping between them, especially when there's nobody here to talk to me. Oh, I'm so sad nobody's talking to me. Going to 119.55 Martel 20. Goodbye. Brisbane Centre, Martel 20, entering your airspace at 5,500 feet. Okay, so we've got 17 minutes left en route. We are 42 nautical miles from Rockhampton. The joys of the navigational screen. And we've got some more cloud. And some more interesting bits of land out there. Normally, after that little sightseeing section, I would pull us back up to 8,000 feet, but as it is, I might just take us to 6 because we will be going down again quite soon. Just set that to the VY speed just to get us there a little quicker without having to fiddle with the engine settings too much. One of the joyful things about this sort of autopilot control of... Oh look, we've got islands that are actually photographed as islands again. What luxury. Yes, I'm definitely going to be looking into what mods there are to improve the island imaging. But yes, this, so, the more fancy, like, airliner, autopilots, you tell it the altitude and it will, control how you get there. And, it'll probably be controlling your engines as well and all this sort of stuff. But on this one, what we have is, so, heading mode, you've seen me use a lot, that'll just hold us to a particular heading. Nav mode, which takes us to our different waypoints and follows the track. Whether heading mode keeps you to a track or a heading is an interesting question that varies between planes. Basically, heading is the way that the nose is pointing, and track is the way that the plane is actually moving. So, essentially, heading plus airspeed plus crosswind. So you might often notice that in particularly heavy airborne crosswinds, the nose is pointing, quite significantly off. Let's just look at this. So we've got 11 to 15 knot crosswind, and you can see that we are about 5 degrees off in heading from the course we're actually flying. You can see that little green marker just to the left of the centre of the primary flight display. That is our actual direction of travel. So, if we were doing a crosswind landing with this sort of crosswind, I'd not be lining the nose up on the runway, I'd be lining that little green marker up on the runway, which is why crosswind landings are hard. But, when you're looking outside the plane, what you're doing is aligning the nose such that the runway is coming straight towards you and not going off to one side or the other. The ability of the human eye and brain to detect and to process movement and relative movement is incredibly powerful and not designed for this, but it will do. Like, a lot of how you look outside the plane when controlling an approach is you get the runway lined up, and then you fiddle with the controls such that it stops moving other than getting bigger. And if you start that when you are lined up with the runway and at the correct 3-ish degrees above it, and then you just keep it not moving in the window, just getting bigger, you will land successfully. We've got some more traffic. 10 o'clock, 4 miles at my altitude. And flying the opposite direction. I do not have them in sight. That's another caravan apparently, but no, they are in those clouds. Brisbane Centre, Martel 20, do not have the traffic in sight. But luckily they are flying opposite our course, so that will not be a problem in terms of traffic collisions. How long have I been talking since the last cough? How long have I been talking? Hello. I don't know how long I've been. So, I've got a bit of a dry cough today. So hopefully that wasn't too long of the stream utterly silent. But as I had the airport charts up on the other monitor, since I wasn't watching chat too closely since it was so silent. But, Piney Tree, I am very grateful to have you here for at least the landing section of the flight. We have flown over the southern parts of the Great Barrier Reef, including Fitzroy Reef. And, you know, I gave Victoria Goddard a nice plug there and told people to read Hans the Emperor at the Feet of the Sun if they want to understand me more. So, you know, the recording will be there, but as I've been flying for hour and a half, a bit more, sorry, I'm not going to fly you back out to Fitzroy Reef. But yes, as a fun fact, we are just north of the Tropic of Capricorn now. Rockhampton, the city we're flying into, the small town just south of us is, you know, filled with the tourist trap marker of where the Tropic of Capricorn passes through. And yes, if you'd like to find it on Google Earth, then find the city of Rockhampton and go directly east out to sea, and you will find the Capricorn Island chain, and follow it south and you'll find Fitzroy Reef and a few other reefs. And on the recorded version, I'm still grumpy about not knowing how long I had my mic muted for. I may need to go back in and add a caption of that when I make the long-term recording version. Sorry, lost train of thought there. But yes, so on the recording there is rambling about the definitions of the tropics, why those lines are where they are, and, you know, other such environmental things. But yes, so we are just coming into land, avoiding meeting the mountains that are around Rockhampton, and just doing a nice downwind pattern entry for Rockhampton Airport, which is thankfully a controlled airport. We took off from one that just has a traffic channel, so, you know, the landing last week had to have a go around because somebody else pulled onto the runway for a takeoff while I was on short final. So it was engines to full, pull up, turn away, don't land directly on top of this idiot. So, you know, if you want to see a somewhat stressful go around where my calm landing approach voice is slightly interrupted but very useful, yeah, that was a bit of a situation. Okay, we are at a good sort of point for our turn in towards the airport. Our clearance was for a left downwind, and might do the turn to end up at BRK NC. That looks like a good waypoint to enter our final approach, and we'll drop down to 2,200 feet. We were originally descending to 2,600 feet, but then discovered some mountains that come up to about 28. And yes, Wing Commander Lamington is, of course, with me. Some of the lovely flat bits and crinkly bits. You coming in this late into the stream makes me glad it was lasting a little longer than I had originally planned. It's nice to have a little bit of company for this. I was rambling away to myself fairly thoroughly for most of the flight, so there's some interesting Great Barrier Reef facts and reef facts, and me struggling with certain ridiculous words pronunciation. The STSST consonant cluster between two words gave me quite the challenge. And yes, I explained why it's called the Great Barrier Reef, because it is such a it is a reef that is such a barrier. Madness, I know. And there are several shipwreck-themed islands. Oh look, life continuing to happen is just the thing that life does. I'm sure that if I'd started the stream an hour later, you would have had some other life thing happen that meant that you'd still be coming in an hour 40 into the flight. That's just how life is. But yes, everybody in the audience, and you in particular, should not feel bad about the stream things that you miss. Just remember that I'm grateful for the stream things that you don't miss. Turning for the base leg. And just a lovely little hill there that's just in the middle of not much. And of course the thing with, you know, nobody being actually online for my opening spiel is that so I've decided to open a Ko-fi/Ko-fi account, and the in-character explanation for that is that while the in-flight catering services continue to be provided by our wonderful passengers, we also have a Ko-fi machine in the back for those who'd like to who'd like to get themselves a drink and fund Wing Commander Lamington's snack budget. Well, thank you for the brief company, and definitely thank you for telling me I was on mute. I would still be on mute if you hadn't. But it has been nice having you for this a little bit, and enjoy the recording whenever you get time to go find it. And we are just getting in towards landing, and that sure is a weather. Someday I will have a third monitor just for OBS so that I can actually see those setup things and realise when I've screwed up like that. So yes, I'm definitely going to have to go through the recording of this find how long I was on mute for. And of course that will be completely unrecoverable audio just because it's just going straight into OBS and well, technically the audio is going into voice mod, which isn't going into OBS, which is why sometimes I can screw up the audio settings even more if I don't set them up in the correct order. But yeah, this is the only recording software running, so that audio is just lost. But let's start and turn towards. So we are turning final. At which point we engage our nav mode. Altitude for the initial approach here. Landing lights, strobe lights on, seatbelt light on. Lovely, lovely. Looks like we might be coming into some more weather for this landing, so I may start the calming voice a little sooner than I might otherwise. And we will activate the approach mode, which means that the autopilot will hold us on this GPS LNAV course. So that is both the direction and the side-to-side position of it. And as the glide slope comes down to meet us, we will start on the glide slope. So you can see on the right side, just next to the altitude indicator, we have G for glide slope and a little diamond that is all the way off the top of the screen. So that is the fact that we are low compared to the glide slope. The glide slope is above us, and as I think I was commenting last week, possibly just before being distracted by the go-around, that does mean that that instrument reads backwards compared to initial instinct, because that thing pointing upwards means you are low, not high. The thing that it is tracking is high, which I always have to double check because it is just confusing to me. So we had our pattern entry permission, but we have not had further notification from that, which means that I'm going to set a go-around altitude on the instrument, which I believe will be something in the order of, I think 2,000 feet would be a good go-around altitude, so that if we need to just re-engage everything, yes. 10 nautical miles, minimum sector altitude 3,200. Okay, we are setting our go-around altitude as 3,200. Okay. So if we have to re-engage the standard autopilot, we will just be going up, diddly up. Okay. So we should be hitting our top of descent just around the final marker. Outside, which is fine. It means that our visibility is a little bit trash, but we will make it through. approach. So we set heading to the runway heading, or the current course. Okay, so seatbelt lights on, flaps to landing position. And there's the glide slope. At this point we are definitely watching outside and forwards for other planes nicely lit up. Okay, runway in sight. Other aircraft getting clearances. There's an aircraft on the runway heading away from us. Lovely flashy beacon there. Not sure if anybody else can see that. Just me. Cleared to land, runway 15, Martel 20. And there's our landing clearance. So as we get closer, we pay attention to our speed. Autopilot is keeping us on the approach nicely. The microphone is on. stopping too much on the runway. Want to clear it nice and briskly for the next guy. Rolling. Right, let's add a little power to keep us rolling. Keeping it to about 30 knots. And there's the taxiway. Slowing down to maneuvering speed. We're off. Going to 121.8 Martel 20. Goodbye. And we finish pulling off the runway. Clear spot here, just past the marker. Parking brake on. Clear that warning. Okay. Taxi lights on, landing lights off, strobe lights off, seatbelt lights on. Attention passengers, we've landed safely in Rockhampton and the local time is 1:06 PM. Please remain seated until the plane comes to a complete stop at whatever ridiculous parking spot they give us, because queuing for the exit in an 8-seater makes you look even more ridiculous than normal. Taxi clearance. Rocky Ground, Martel 20, request taxi to parking. Taxiing to General Aviation Parking using taxiway Charlie, Martel 20. Taxi clearance check. Inertial separator handle bypass. Prop RPM minimum. Fuel condition low idle. Parking brake off. Before arrival taxi checklist complete. There's our marshaller. So we follow the directions and we make sure not to squish them. Okay, parking brake on. And we are pretty much on our mark. Okay, parking brake set. Power lever idle. Leader heat switch off. ITT range stable. Prop RPM feather. Slows down. And fuel condition cut. Temperature dropping, torque dropping, speed dropping. Lovely. Inertial separator handle normal. External lights off. And a seat. Well, why is that? Okay, asset and fuel boost off. Need to move that further up the checklist. And seatbelt light off. Attention passengers, this now concludes our flight from Bundaberg to Rockhampton, and we here at Martel Air hope you've enjoyed your time in our tiny sky bus. Please wait until I have opened the door and you can calmly deplane in an orderly fashion. Our baggage handling services today will be provided by our wonderful passengers, so thank you for not leaving any of your luggage behind. Any personal belongings left behind as you leave the plane will be assumed to be a present to the co-pilot and enjoyed thoroughly. And feel free to visit our coffee machine at the back of the plane on your way out if you fancy a drink to warm you as you walk out onto the tarmac at the temperature of 21 degrees, which, well, seems a lot nicer than it is in Canberra. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay, fuel boost switch off. NG is 0, check. Avionics 2 off. Avionics 1 off. Battery switch off. And fuel tank selectors both off. So that gets us to the end of this flight, and we are still in some interesting looking weather here in Rockhampton, but that is an Australian winter / tropical whatever is going on for you. So we will check out my parking job. Pretty good, very centered, lovely, and maybe 20 centimeters short of exactly the mark, but our marshaller did tell me to cut there, so I'm pleased with that. And just making sure we can see Wing Commander Lamington through the little window here, because he is the goodest co-pilot. So thank you for watching, those of you who have, and thank you to Piney Tree for your brief bit of company there, letting me know that I was on mute because I was coughing and then got distracted by flying. And we will leave it there, and hopefully I will see you all next week, or at least be seen by you next week, as we continue further up the Queensland coast into parts that I will have to check a map before even having a vague idea of what the flight plan will be. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.